So Berserk's Golden Age arc is truly special, in my opinion. I want to delve deep into it. I just finished reading it after I think like 2 days. Honestly, I kind of just binged the whole thing. I had a much harder time with the first arc, but the second one just flew by. This will be differently structured. I'm not gonna give too much of a summary. I feel like at this point, I mean, people have probably read or watched this. I mean, Berserk's so old. If you want just a short, impressions, if you can tolerate really dark, messed up content, definitely read it. It is dark. It at some points very gratuitous with the violence and a lot of the sexual crime stuff, but I do think it has a purpose and it shows. It shows a lot about humanity, a lot about our characters, and it helps inform their past and their decisions, and it adds extra layers to the three main characters of the story. But yeah, I'm just gonna go over the three main characters in the story rather than going through like the plot and the synopsis, and just give my thoughts on their journey so far in the story. I'm probably not gonna do this for the other arcs, and we'll probably just talk about literal plot points more so. But I feel like with this arc, it just makes more sense to do it this way. So let's begin. So first character I'm gonna talk about is the main character of the story, Guts. We get to see his backstory in this arc. We get to see that he basically was born from nothing. He was just treated like garbage. I mean, like they found him in a lake on his dead mother. Like they thought he also was dead. I guess his mother had just birthed him, and a mercenary group luckily found him. He had a really terrible upbringing. The surrogate mother, I guess his surrogate mother passes away pretty early on in his life, and then his surrogate dad, he's just a piece of trash, mercenary. Very similar, I would say, to the relationship between the mercenary and the main character in Vinland Saga as well. If you've checked that out, he's a piece of trash to the point that he even prostitutes him to another mercenary in their troop. He really has no one that gives him any love, attention, support. He has to just keep on surviving and striving and be on his own ever since he's a kid. And it really shows as the journey goes along. He goes from being this very heartless, kind of like selfish person, and then obviously he's really skilled as a swordsman. I mean, that's all he has in his life, war and fighting. It's not until he meets the band of hawks, Griffith, the leader, Casca, and the others, where we start seeing his demeanor change. He, as I said, he goes from being cold, distrustful, very rude towards like everyone, and starts warming up to people. And he even like takes on later on in the story. You can really feel the progression of him slowly becoming like a leader in the band of hawks, and even to the point where the people in his crew love him. We even get to see some of the members like Gaston. He really ingratiates with Guts. And I think he's what part of the Raiders in a subdivision of the Band of Hawks. I do like him, this journey he goes through. It is really interesting. It feels very real. Seeing his relationship with Griffith and Casca, it's just so complex. Like these two relationships he has on, he everyone in the Band of Hawks. I don't want to talk too much about Griffith because I'll get to that as he's going to be the third character I talk about. But he obviously, Guts kind of looks up to him, as do most of the members of the Hawks. Guts doesn't, as so far, he's really had no purpose in life. He's just been surviving, struggling. By the end, they call him the struggler, the Skull Lord, or whatever calls him the struggler. But yeah, he just is fighting. He doesn't really have a purpose, doesn't really have a dream. They keep talking about dreams in this arc. Griffith has a really clear dream. And Guts kind of looks up to him just like the other members of the Hawks do. He wants to be an equal to Griffith, because Griffith tells him that he only sees people that will fulfill essentially their dream by any means necessary as an equal. Other people that just are followers and don't really have their own independent dreams, he does not see as equals. He sees as lesser, as subordinates. So this really gets to Guts, right? And as the journey goes along, he ends up leaving the Hawks, and chaos ensues from there. I feel like Guts, he is kind of like humanity at its core. He really struggles, but he keeps on living. He exhibits so much raw emotion throughout this specific arc. His primary emotion obviously is rage. His depiction of rage, Kentaro Miura's, the author's depiction of rage, is so good. Seeing Guts go through these fits of anger and he just snaps and like murders everyone. It's so well drawn. But we do see other sadder emotions as well from him. We do see him feeling desolate, hopeless in a lot of scenes, especially a really important scene I think for me is when we start seeing his relationship with Casca grow into a romance, and there's a very gratuitous sex scene. Yeah, too much for me, but I get why he's doing it. I get the point of it because he shows this in an early first, like in the beginning. I'm like, oh my god, what am I reading? Like if my wife saw what I was reading, she'd be like, are you reading pornography or something? But then something triggers in Guts, and he remembers his past, and he remembers what happened with him and Donovan, who assaulted him when he was a kid, and he retreats into this like he has kind of like this nervous breakdown where he retreats. His inner child comes out, his fear, his trauma, and it's so well depicted in such a raw and graphical way in the manga that really hits home. But Guts, obviously, a great character, just a very human depiction of people that have been through so much, but they just still keep on going. He refuses to give up and refuses to die. Next, I'm gonna talk about Casca. Casca, to me, she is very fascinated with Griffith. I mean, Griffith saved her from being assaulted by like a member of like royalty from like a king or something, and basically gives her life meaning. Now her life's meaning, at least to me it seems like at that point, is, oh, I want to prove myself to Griffith. She worships Griffith as a god, basically. A lot of the Band of the Hawks, I think most of them worship Griffith as a god. She works her hardest. She's the only woman, I think, from the Band of Hawks. And obviously, there's a lot of discrimination that goes on with that. There's a lot of topics of that during this specific arc in the show or in the manga. Yeah, she then meets Guts. Guts immediately catches Griffith's eye when they meet, and she starts growing jealous of Guts because Griffith just seems to spend most of his time with him. He seems to depend upon Guts more, where it seems like before she used to depend upon Casca as like a second in command before Guts' appearance. And and this is a lot of commentary. I think she has a lot of self-hatred. There's a lot of like built-in sexism that she does to herself in this like cruel medieval world. Women obviously are treated as disposable objects, and even our main character Guts, he makes a lot of mockery about Casca being a woman throughout the show, and it really shows. I mean, the mentality. I mean, we wouldn't expect anything different. That's the reality. Even if this wasn't a fantasy medieval world, for like things are like that to this day, right? There's a lot of this self-loathing due to her sex. She's not a man, so I think in her mind she has internalized a lot of it. She doesn't think she can be as good. That maybe the thing that separates her and Guts is the fact that she's not a man, and that's why she can't reach to that level. But then later on in the story, as she starts to see Guts and see how he's also changing as a person, she starts to ingratiate herself and start seeing his true like side and his softer side. And as I said, that's where like kind of the romance blooms between them. I think both Guts and Casca, as I said, they both see Griffith as someone like above them, like this non-human entity, and they kind of bond over it. There's kind of like a weird love triangle going on between the three of them. Is very interesting. Griffith There's a lot of very subtle storytelling, I think, throughout the manga. Griffith doesn't explicitly talk about any romantic feelings, having romantic feelings toward Casca or towards Guts, but at least to me, it's a lot of it also seems implied between from him to them, especially by the end of the story. So yeah, this takes us to the third and I think most interesting character, at least in this arc, which is Griffith. Griffith, he has this grandiose dream, right? He will do anything to achieve this dream. However, he still has somewhat of a conscience, and he does feel remorse when people have to be sacrificed for his dream. I think initially my take on him is, as I said, this like person above everyone else, not human, deity that can show true humanity and kindness, but also shows darkness and no remorse against his enemies. And a good way to show this throughout the manga is his eyes. His eyes are a very important like visual device in the narrative. He'll stare with these hawk eyes sometimes that are like truly terrifying, but then other times he'll show like this soft, like like saint. Like it's depicted like he's a saint. So I just love these depictions of him, these two sides of the same person. But we do get more of his human side as the story goes on. He sells his body at some point to a king to make more money so that he has to make less sacrifices. So he has to have less battles to earn money so less people can, die. There's less casualties. So we see these moments of weakness from him where he hesitates on things. But at the same time, he also seems to be kind of like protected by the egg or the behelit or sheer luck or prophecy, whatever. He kind of gets his way against all these crazy odds and assassination attempts. So there's like a mix of like the mythical with the human with regards to him. It all comes to a head when he's so close to reaching his dream, which I guess I've gone so far I haven't even talked about his dream, which I think is another topic, a whole other topic to talk about his dream. I take it, at least as of now, as being him. He wants to be royalty. He wants to be king. He wants to have power over people. He wants to not be seen as lesser than people of royal blood, at least so far. And yeah, I think he just has this vision of himself being a ruler of an empire. Yeah, this all kind of comes to a head by the end when Guts decides to suddenly leave the Band of Hawks, and they're close to Griffith is close to reaching his dream of at least becoming nobility. He's about to be, to be named a knight or something, with the king of Midland. So he's so close, and then, there's already there's already a path along the way to make him reach kinghood, which is to somehow get to marry the daughter of the king, maybe through some other, devious plot, and king dies, he would become the king. So the path is set for him. He just has to be patient. But Guts suddenly deciding, I'm going to go on this journey on my own and figure out what my dream is, what my purpose is, really breaks his psyche. He ends up just throwing everything away. And he ends up being horribly tortured for a year, to the point where he can't achieve his dream anymore. He's unrecognizable. He can't move. He can't raise a sword. His tongue has been cut. He can't speak. His face looks hideous by the time Guts and Casca have saved him. But we keep seeing, as I said, his eyes. He keeps looking at, while he's being saved, at now Guts and Casca having this romantic relationship, seeing how the men at this point see Guts as like this leader, and they love him. Maybe he's seeing like that Guts is kind of taking that spot. Guts seemingly has found his dream, which is to become stronger, I guess, and keep fighting, and he only knows the way of the sword. Guts has a dream now. He is in some way seems like he's taking away Griffith's dream, taking all the love that Griffith has towards him, and his number one fan, Casca, now seems to really love Guts, maybe in a human, romantic manner than like a deity manner. But yeah, he sees all this, and this is what I think finally lets him sever his ties to humanity and accept the God Hand's offer. So now we get to the end of this arc, which everyone is pretty infamous. Even if you haven't seen or read it, you probably have heard of it or maybe seen a clip of it, where it all goes to hell literally with Griffith summoning the God Hand with the Behelit and then accepting, basically trading in the remaining members of the Band of the Hawk in exchange for ascending, not to kinghood or not to become a king, but to become, I guess, more than a king, god or a demon. I don't know. It seems like murky. The line's blurred here. If he's a god, angel, demon, he's kind of all these things, I guess, or maybe more of it will be explained as the story goes along. And then we get these really gruesome, horrific scenes of like demonic beings eating all the hawks and all the members we've seen so far. Pippin, Corcus, not beloved by me at least, Gaston, Casca. Horrible things happen to them, especially Casca. I'm not gonna talk too much about what happens to her or not describe it too much because yeah. And we see Griffith be reborn as Femto, join the God Hand as the 5th member. It really, I think I mentioned this in my previous video on Berserk, but I did watch the movies for the Golden Age when they originally came out many years ago. I don't remember too much of the story, but I remember obviously the ending. And I remember when I saw those movies, I didn't know anything about it. I feel like the movies don't do as good of a job as the manga, because the movies I think are an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it's 3 of them. I think the manga does a much better job setting up the horrible events to come, because there's already so much darkness and so many bad things that have happened to a lot of these characters, especially like to our 3 main characters, where when all this kind of happens, it's not like it came out of the blue. There's also a lot of hints about what's to come, obviously, with Nosferatu saw like this demonic being talking about it. The Skull Lord, I think is his name, talking about it as well. And then if you read the previous arc, the Black Swordsman arc, which I think in the timeline of the manga happens right after this one, it makes, you already know something bad happened. And something bad does happen. I mean, it is horrifying to see, but it makes sense, and it really, you need, I think, this shock to make you understand, to truly make you understand what it means to lose your humanity. You have to be disgusted by these people's actions. Like, you have to be disgusted by what Griffith does. Otherwise, it doesn't hit, the impact doesn't land with the God Hand and this gambit that you have to take on to get these powers, right? You to add on to that, you have to be disgusted to also feel what Guts is feeling. When Guts is depicted in his rage moments in the Eclipse scenes, you feel it. You feel it as well, because you are as disgusted and as angry as he is while you're reading. But at that point, you understand, when everything's gone to hell, you've lost everyone, things will never be the same. Guts is a forever changed man, even though he was becoming happier and happier throughout this arc, finding meaning in everything, and then to see this all crumble down also for him. Things are different now. The world has forever changed. Moving forward, we're not going back to the previous time, and seeing Casca devolve into what she's devolved into, where she is in kind of this childlike state where she's not talking because of the trauma that the things Femto did to her. In my opinion, this arc is amazing. It really shows the highs and lows of humanity to the extreme, and I do wonder what's to come next. I'll be honest, I find it hard for Berserk to reach the highs of this arc and the lows, I guess, of this arc. I am questioning how this will all play out, especially now that we, you know, for the most part, the Golden Age arc is a very grounded arc in the sense of like there's not a lot of demonic power god stuff until like the very end, and with like Nosferatu Sod for like a moment. I'm wondering how we go from like a kind of more or less grounded in reality story now to this fantasy world, especially coming from the Black Swordsman arc, which is way very different in tone than this. This is much better in my opinion. Much better. I don't think that's controversial at all. This is much better. I'm gonna definitely keep rating, but let me know what you guys think of the Golden Age arc. Is it the best arc in the Berserk, or does it get better from here? Thank you so much for watching. Bye.